Hello, and welcome to the North Coast Journal Preview. This is a show where we take a look at what's coming to this week's edition of the North Coast Journal. I am your host, Tanya Shrum, and we are joined by North Coast Journal's arts and feature editor, Jennifer Fumiko Cahill, and our California local news fellow, Annie Toe. Welcome to you both.
Good to see you, Tanya.
Yes, and it's lovely to see both of you again. I hope you're enjoying some sunny weather.
I actually ventured out today. I walked 2-3 blocks in actual sunshine, and that's my year's vitamin D right there.
I was going to say we got to get that vitamin D back while we can. Well, we have a very exciting, packed with news week again here at the Journal. You're going to tease our cover story for us.
Yes, this week, we've talked about the Klamath dams before and dam removal, and there are so many stories. Every time we publish something about the removal of the dams, somebody comes to us and says, well, this is the real story, or here's this other story about it. And in fact, there are so many layers because this is a multi-generational effort, and so many different people, different tribes, different groups are all involved in this. And this week, we have a story that is from Grist by Anita Hofschneider and Jake Biddle. And they have traced sort of a kind of like almost like an oral history, like they talked to a bunch of people who were involved and really focused on the characters, these people who were working, some of them to the very last moments of their life, on making sure that these dams would come down. And there are a lot of really fascinating people who are, Native activists, and it's really wonderful. And I strongly encourage everybody to read it. Once you're sucked in to the story, which it's no brief little thing, but there is more online because this is actually originally published in Grist as a 5-part series. So the rest of it is online. You'll be able to see it on our website, and it's going to pull you in because these people are just incredible. And it gives you a different appreciation for the work of getting the dam removals to really happen.
I have to concur. I read the first part last night, and I am riveted and can't wait to finish the story online when it's available tomorrow, correct?
Yes, it'll be on stands and online on Thursday.
I am really excited, and I hope everybody gets a chance to read it because I had no idea it's been going on. Technically, I mean, the story begins on the year I was born.
Yeah, it's incredible. And, one thing that really moved me is that one of the activists who was involved in it and really integral actually fell ill, and towards the end made her compatriots promise that they would get it done if she passed on before them, which was, it was dramatic. And it's really, I don't want to spoil nothing for you, so please enjoy it.
All right. And with that, we're also going to go to your feature this week involving some of our local breweries.
Yes. If you were wondering, and there's all sorts of things happening right now, fluctuations happening with the tariffs, Donald Trump's tariffs on every country and some penguins is an evolving story. We're seeing how it's rippling out in different businesses. And this week, hat tip to Kim Ware for giving me the tip that this was something to look into. We looked into how local beer makers are faring and what they're anticipating as tariffs come in. So there are a number of things that the beer world has to be concerned about. Specifically, craft brewers are smaller, and because they are buying fewer of their supplies, whether it's aluminum or hops or malt, sometimes they don't have as much buying power. So when things become scarce, as they did, for example, during the height of the pandemic, when things become scarce, sometimes bigger companies, corporations squeeze them out. And so the little guys don't get what they need. So that's a concern. And I talked to a few folks who run local breweries, and you would think maybe that since it is a local brewery with everything made here, that they would not be impacted by tariffs, that they are not dealing with imported goods. It's all stuff that's made here. In fact, most of the brewers I talked to got their materials within the US for hops, but some of the hops come from overseas, specifically Canada. Malt comes from either Canada or Europe, and also aluminum. When it comes to cans, aluminum is a precious metal in this one case. And even if the aluminum company is here in America, oftentimes they're using their raw materials, the scrap, from another country. So when it comes to canning, bottling, stuff like that, a lot of beer makers locally are going to be seeing some changes. And depending on how negotiations go forward, they're kind of in what one of them described as wait and see mode. So I spoke to Meredith Mayer at Six Rivers Brewery, for one, and she was saying that, for now they've got some cans, they've got some kegs. They are concerned about the price of malt going up because it's going to be imported from Europe. It is one of those businesses where, Six Rivers Brewery has both the brewery and the restaurant. And so they are feeling the crunch when it comes to imported goods in terms of like food. So avocados, limes, that's right. Those Six Rivers Brewery margaritas, tariff affected. So they're looking at possible solutions. They're looking at, what are we going to do? But they can't really make any choices until the final word comes down. And that continues to be in flux. Is there going to be a pause, etc.? Over at Mad River, they don't really ship out, but Canada is one of their main providers for their ingredients and their scrap and whatnot for the aluminum that they buy in the U.S. So they're having some projects that they're having to reconsider and think, okay, how are we going to do this? We got to pause and go back and check what this is going to cost us. They were going to put in a new canning line, but in order to do that, they've got to really be serious about, okay, what is this really going to cost us by the time the tariffs come down? They've also got, I spoke to General Manager Linda Cooley over at Mad River Brewing, and she was saying, what we don't know is how much the aluminum company we use gets from China, for example. So if they're getting scrap from China or scrap from Canada, then that's going to change the cost of their domestically produced aluminum. It's worth noting that the Aluminum Association has basically said that even if everybody in their association, even if all the aluminum manufacturers went full bore and full steam ahead and just produced as much as they could, they still could not make enough to meet the demand for aluminum in America and for aluminum cans. So imported aluminum cans are important. They are something that we can't just turn around and all of a sudden tomorrow we've got a factory where we can make them. It puts us in a really difficult space. One of the more interesting conundrums that I found was in talking to Briar Bush over at Lost Coast Brewery. So they're having the same issues with cans, even bottles, partly because they have a system that has certain requirements that they're having trouble finding someone to meet domestically. Their bottle manufacturer closed down, so they're having to shift to somewhere else that's probably going to be Mexico. Turns out the caps for bottles come from Greece and Italy. Who knew? They seem fancier now, don't they? And then the other end of it is once they've already, got all their stuff to can their beer, they have overseas sales to consider. Unlike some smaller breweries, Lost Coast Brewery sells overseas. Their biggest market overseas and their biggest ship to delivery is China. The last time in 2018, Breyer told me he was in Shanghai meeting with his broker and his buyer over in China, and they were talking about what they were going to do, and then all of a sudden the tariffs were announced, and they had to sit there and basically like write on napkins and try and figure out, okay, what are we going to do? How are we going to go forward? And he said that at that point, his business exporting to China dropped by 25%, and it never came back. So this is a real concern, how this is going to change, because you can just keep increasing the price of something, but at some point it's not worth it for them to do business. And so they'll say, yeah, we'll import from somebody else, or we'll import from somewhere else, right? And when it comes to what we're going to be paying domestically and in Humboldt County for beer, it's a really tough call. All the brewers that I talked to, all the folks, the managers and everybody that I spoke to emphasized to me they really don't want to raise prices on local consumers. That is a main goal for them. They know everybody's hit hard. Linda Cooley was saying, everybody talks about, oh, you got to buy local, but she recognizes that sometimes you cannot afford to. And so what they're trying to do over at Mad River Brewery, and what I see pretty much everybody doing, is trying to keep their price down to deal with a slimmer margin as long as they can hold out, so that they are still making their beer available to locals. And another thing Linda said that was interesting was, she said, nobody's talking about our customers and how they're holding back because of the tariffs. It's not just about importing cans or, exporting beer. It's also about how people feel about spending money and the instability of watching the stock market plummet and then bounce up if there's a pause or whatever. That instability makes people pinch their pennies. It does not make people want to go out for a big round of beer and a fancy dinner. It doesn't make people want to travel or go to festivals. She was noting that most businesses are seeing this. And, I want to talk to some more people. If you're out there and you have a restaurant business or something related, hospitality related, I would love to hear from you. It is going to be a really unpredictable time ahead, and I'm wishing everybody luck, but I want to know how things are going. And I know that people around Humboldt, you go to restaurants, you go to bars, you go to the grocery store, and you see prices changing, etc. And I think it's important that we understand the link between the decisions that are being made nationally and the impacts that we're feeling here in our county.
Absolutely. Well said, Jennifer. And thank you for this reporting. I know it hits home, and as a lover of Mad River beer, it definitely will impact like how often I want to go out there. But you can always get those growlers and fill them up and take them home. No aluminum required. Hopefully that'll be a bridge for some of us locally. Well, thank you again. And with that, we're going to pivot to Annie, and she's going to fill us in on all the happenings last Saturday.
Yeah, last Saturday there was the Hands Off rally that was happening nationwide. There were over 1,400 rallies that happened nationwide, and in Eureka at the Humboldt County Courthouse, there was also a rally, and hundreds of people showed up. They all had different signs, many saying hands off in reference to the current President Donald Trump's administration, and also with Doge. with Elon Musk, they want them to be hands off and not touch the things that and rights that they think are being taken away or at risk of taken away. This was organized by Karen Barmast, and I spoke with her, and she told me that one of the things that she was really worried about was Social Security. And she was talking about how, as someone who is a cancer survivor, she relies on things like Medicare and Social Security in order to, if she ever has to go to the hospital again, she relies on that to help fund it. And when I was out at the rally, there were so many people there, and I got to speak with someone who I think had a really powerful story to share in terms of what would happen if people were to lose Medicare or Medicaid. I spoke with an individual named Hollis, and they are a type 1 diabetic, and she held a sign that said, I'm type 1 diabetic and I'm dead in days. Please save Medicare. And she was talking about how she relies on Medicare and Medicaid to fund her diabetes medication, and if she doesn't receive her medication, she cannot survive without it, and she cannot afford to get the medication without these types of government-assisted programs. And all types of people came out. It was from as young as 6 years old. Some people brought their family, and I spoke with a stay-at-home mother. Her name is Autumn Garcia, and she brought her family, and she even told me how her daughter asked her if she could participate. Her daughter is like 6 years old around, and she said everyone can participate if they're a citizen, or well, if they're someone who lives in America, basically. And she was there to fight for her daughter's rights. The quote that she said that I thought was really powerful was, "I'm fighting for my daughter to have more rights and not come into the world with less rights." And her husband held a sign that said, "Hands off my daughter's body." And they were also fighting for immigration's rights, because since Donald Trump has taken office, he has imposed a lot of executive orders that are strengthening against immigration rights. There have been even cases where people have been sent off to countries where it was like a inaccurate deportation, and there are even court cases. There was a man who was sent to Salvador, and he came back and is now in a court case about it because he was illegally deported. And I also spoke with other people. There are LGBTQ flags, Palestinian flags, Black Lives Matter flags, American flags, all flown together to show they were all standing together, all groups of people. There was a 90-year-old lady. Her name is Cynthia Julian, and she came and she spoke about how these rights that are at risk right now are rights that when she was older, she fought for, and she fought to win these rights, and now they're at risk again of being lost. And there were a lot of people there who are older generations, multiple 90-year-old people, even though some couldn't even stand. Hollis had her mother at the rally, and she said her mother couldn't stand and she had to sit at the bench, but she still wanted to be out there. And they all were coming out because they said that they recognized that these were fights that they had done in the past, and they see the way that it's going backwards. I also spoke with, her name is Elle Penner. She's a jazz singer, and she also is a adoption specialist for foster children. And she spoke about the threats to LGBTQ rights and trans rights since the new administration. One of the things being Donald Trump made an executive order that said that there are only two genders, female and male, and to be recognized in the United States. And she, along with many others, were out there with LGBTQ signs, and there were even chants of people basically chanting about the rights that they think are being taken away, including civil rights, Medicare, Social Security, trans rights, LGBTQ rights, women's rights, and there was a lot that people had to say about it.
Your story was really well done, and I was there on Saturday, excuse me. Though one of the things that was so heartening, not only seeing this giant tent of people with a myriad of concerns, but also the folks that were either older or they had small children, and they literally were circling the block and honking and showing support, and it was quite an event, and I am so proud of our community.
Yeah, there were so many people. There were people in front of the courthouse, but also spanning along the streets and then across the streets too. And then cars would come in to honk too. And it was amazing to see so many people come out all with one goal to rally against or together.
I will say I did not expect, I don't know why. What am I, stupid? I did not expect a kinetic sculpture to show up, but in fact one did. There was a big skeleton buggy that was going back and forth and making loops around, and yeah, it was very humbled.
It was, and I appreciate them showing up and showing out for sure. The kinetic madness is with us always. Well, before we wrap up, Annie, is there anything else you would like anybody to know about your story?
You can read it on the website and also on the paper.
Where there is a slideshow, by the way, of photos by Mark Larson. So enjoy those.
Absolutely. And well, if we have a little bit of extra time before the end, I know Jennifer had a few things she might want to tease.
I do. For one thing, Alexander Rondo has a really great story about a couple of photographs in the Images of Water show that's over at the Morris Graves Museum right now through, I believe, the 20th. If you have time, go over and see it. And there are a lot of local photographers that have put in their work, and it's just all beautiful. But Alexander is writing about one photographer in particular, and that's really interesting. And also, in the back of the book, we have Mike Kelly's Washed Up about striped purple jellyfish and why it's so special if you see one washed up dead on our beaches.
And you never want to miss a Mike Kelly story. So, well, that wraps up our time for this week. Thank you to Jennifer and Annie for bringing us all of this information for this week's North Coast Journal. The current edition of the North Coast Journal will be available on newsstands tomorrow. Pick up your copy, or of course you can find it online at northcoastjournal.com. I am Tanya Shrum. Thanks for being with us and staying informed and supportive here at our North Coast community.